Here's something chilling for you. When I was around 6 years old, my family moved into a quiet neighborhood with rows of identical houses and neatly trimmed lawns. Our house had a large backyard that backed up to a dense patch of woods. I was an only child, so I spent a lot of time outside, pretending the woods were my own secret world. One evening, just as the sun was setting, I was playing near the edge of the trees when I heard someone whisper my name. It wasn't my parents. They were inside, getting dinner ready. I froze, looking around, but no one was there. The voice came again, soft and drawn out, like it was trying to lure me in. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, but then I saw movement between the trees, a shadow shifting just out of sight. My heart pounded as I turned and ran inside, slamming the door behind me. I told my parents, but they brushed it off, saying it was probably the wind or a neighbor calling for their child. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again. The same whisper, my name, right outside my window. I pulled the covers up to my chin, my body frozen in fear. The whisper was faint but unmistakable. Someone was outside my window. My room was on the first floor, and my window faced the backyard, just a few feet from the tree line. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping that if I ignored it, it would go away. But then there was a sound, a soft tap against the glass. Not loud, not urgent, just enough to let me know that whoever was out there hadn't left. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might give me away. I wanted to scream for my parents, but fear kept me silent. What if they didn't believe me? What if, by the time they checked, nothing was there? I forced myself to peek out from under the covers, staring at the window. The curtains were pulled closed, but a dim glow from the streetlights outside cast faint shadows against the fabric. And then I saw it, a shape, a figure standing just outside. I couldn't make out details, only the outline of a head and shoulders. It was completely still, like it was waiting for something. My breath came in short, shaky gasps as I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a tree branch swaying in the wind. But deep down, I knew better. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. I kept my eyes locked on the window, afraid that if I looked away, something worse would happen. Finally, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate steps moving away from the house. Then silence. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, watching the window until the first hint of sunrise crept through the curtains. When morning came, I finally got the courage to check outside. My hands shook as I pulled back the curtain, expecting to see nothing but the usual sight of my backyard. But in the dirt below my window, there were footprints. They weren't mine. They weren't my parents'. They led from the tree line, stopping right at my window, and then they disappeared back into the woods. I told my parents again, but they barely glanced at the tracks before telling me it was probably just an animal or maybe a neighbor passing through. But I knew someone had been there, and worst of all, they knew my name. For the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I avoided the backyard, refusing to go near the woods, even during the day. My parents still weren't concerned, brushing off my fear as just an overactive imagination. But at night, I felt it, that presence, the uneasy sensation of being observed, even when my curtains were drawn tight. Then, one evening, something strange happened. I was in the living room, half watching TV while my mom cooked dinner. My dad was still at work, and the house was quiet except for the occasional clatter of pots and pans. That's when I heard it again, my name. But this time, it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the house. The voice was soft, almost a whisper, and it came from down the hallway, near my bedroom. My whole body tensed. I turned to look at my mom, expecting her to have heard it too, but she kept stirring the pot, completely unaware. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. "Mom, did you hear that?" She barely glanced up. "Hear what, sweetheart?" I hesitated. If I told her someone had whispered my name, she'd probably just tell me I was imagining things again. But I wasn't. I knew I wasn't. "Never mind," I muttered, backing away from the hallway. I didn't go to my room that night. I slept on the couch with the TV on, the noise helping to drown out my fear. I told myself that maybe I had imagined it, maybe my mind was playing tricks on me after everything that had happened. But deep down, I knew better. The next night, things got worse. It was late, and I was tossing and turning, unable to sleep. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I turned onto my side, facing the living room window. That's when I saw it. A figure standing just outside. My breath caught in my throat. It was tall and still just beyond the glass. The dim glow from the streetlight barely illuminated its features, but I could make out one thing clearly. Its head was tilted slightly, as if it was looking directly at me. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to be a nightmare. But when I opened them, it was still there. And then slowly it raised a hand and knocked. I couldn't move. My entire body locked up as the soft knocking echoed through the quiet house. It wasn't loud or aggressive, just 3 slow, deliberate taps. My breath came in short, panicked gasps, my mind racing through every possible explanation. Maybe it was my dad coming home late. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe I was imagining it. But deep down, I knew none of those things were true. I wanted to run, to scream for my mom, but I couldn't make a sound. I just lay there, gripping the blanket so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded in my ears as I forced myself to look again. The figure hadn't moved. It was still standing there watching, waiting. Then the doorknob rattled. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't my imagination. Someone, or something, was trying to get inside. I scrambled up, nearly tripping over the blankets as I stumbled toward my mom's room. My hands shook as I reached for her door, but just as I was about to push it open, the knocking came again, this time from the back door. It had moved. The realization sent a fresh wave of terror through me. It wasn't just standing in one place. It was circling the house. I pressed my ear to my mom's door, whispering her name as loudly as I dared. She didn't answer. The house was still, as if everything outside of my fear had frozen. I turned, my back pressed against the wood, trying to listen. My pulse hammered so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Then, I noticed something even worse. The knocking had stopped. Silence filled the air, thick and suffocating. My chest ached from holding my breath, but I was too afraid to let it out, because if the knocking had stopped, that meant one thing. Whoever was out there was inside now. A floorboard creaked down the hall, my bedroom door. My vision blurred with panic. I had to wake my mom. I had to do something. But before I could move, another sound broke the silence. A whisper. Right outside the door. It was my name. Again. But this time, it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from just a few feet away. I pressed my back harder against the door, my entire body frozen. The whisper was so close, too close. My name stretched out in a slow, deliberate voice. The air in the hallway felt thick, heavy, like something was standing right there, just out of sight. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't listen. I gripped the doorknob, my sweaty fingers slipping against the metal. If I opened the door, I might get whatever was out there in. But if I stayed, it might already be too late. Then the whisper came again, but this time it wasn't alone. There was another voice. Softer, higher pitched, like a child. My blood turned to ice as I listened. 2 voices, now speaking in hushed tones, murmuring words I couldn't understand. They were too low, too garbled, like they were speaking just under their breath. My heart pounded so hard, I was sure they could hear it. Then, a sound sent fresh terror through me. A giggle. Faint, almost playful, but something about it was wrong. It wasn't happy. It wasn't normal. It was like someone pretending to be a child, mimicking laughter but getting it slightly off, like a broken recording. I clenched my eyes shut, willing myself to wake up from whatever nightmare this was. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But then the voices stopped, cut off in an instant, like someone had flipped a switch. Silence. The door handle twisted. I bit my lip to keep. The knob turned just enough to send a soft click through the air. My stomach dropped. Something was on the other side of the door, something that wasn't supposed to be there. Silence. The door handle twisted. I bit my lip to keep. The knob turned just enough to send a soft click through the air. My stomach dropped. Something was on the other side of the door, something that wasn't supposed to be there. I sucked in a sharp breath, pressing my weight against the wood, hoping, praying, it wouldn't push any further. Then, everything stopped. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. No whispers, no laughter, no movement, just an eerie stillness, as if the entire house was holding its breath along with me. My pulse hammered in my ears, my body frozen in place, waiting for whatever came next. And then the door swung open. I fell back with a gasp, bracing for something, anything to lunge at me, but there was nothing. The hallway was empty. No shadowy figure, no whispering voices, just the dim glow from the nightlight in the corner, flickering slightly as if the power had briefly surged. For a moment, I thought maybe I had imagined it all. Maybe the fear had gotten to me. But then I saw it. The footprints. They trailed from my bedroom door, stopping just inches from where I had been standing. Small, bare footprints, as if a child had been walking through the house. But they weren't normal. They were smudged, almost distorted, as if whoever, or whatever, made them wasn't fully solid. My breath caught in my throat as I followed the prints with my eyes. They didn't lead outside. They didn't even lead to another room. They just ended, right in the middle of the hallway. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. But before I could react, I heard something behind me. A whisper. But this time, it wasn't my name. It was my mother's. My stomach twisted as I turned toward her room, my hands shaking. The door was still closed, just as I had left it, but something felt wrong. The air was heavier, colder. I reached for the doorknob, hesitating for just a second before pushing the door open. She was there, lying in bed, facing away from me. The blankets rose and fell with her slow, steady breathing. Relief flooded through me for a brief moment, until I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The closet door. It was open, just a crack. And from the darkness inside, I saw it. A face. Not fully formed, not fully human. Just a pale, distorted shape peeking through the gap. Watching me. Then, as if it knew I had seen it, the door creaked and slowly began to close on its own. I wanted to scream, to wake my mom, to run out of the house and never look back. But before I could do anything, the door shut completely. And the whisper came one last time. Soft, amused. Not yet. I stood there frozen, staring at the closet door. My whole body felt numb, my breath shallow. I wanted to believe I had imagined it, that the exhaustion, the fear, and the shadows had played tricks on my mind. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something had been in there. Something had been watching me. I forced myself to move, my legs shaky as I backed away. My mother shifted slightly in her sleep, her breathing steady and undisturbed. I wanted to wake her up, to tell her everything, but I knew she wouldn't believe me. She hadn't before. And now, with whatever it was gone, at least for now, there was no proof. Just footprints that had already started fading, and a feeling that I would never be able to explain. I left the room, shutting her door gently behind me, and went back to the living room. I didn't even bother trying to sleep. Instead, I sat curled up on the couch, knees pulled to my chest, watching the windows until the first light of morning crept through. By the time my mom woke up, everything looked normal again. The house was just a house. No footprints, no open doors, no whispers. When she saw me sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, she gave me a puzzled look. "Did you sleep out here?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. I hesitated, then just nodded. "Yeah, bad dreams." She smiled sleepily and ruffled my hair. "You need to stop scaring yourself with those stories, sweetheart." I wanted to tell her it wasn't just stories. That something had been in our house last night, that it knew my name, that it had whispered hers, but I didn't. Because even if she didn't believe me, I knew the truth. I didn't sleep in my room again after that. For weeks, I stayed in the living room, keeping the lights on, jumping at every small sound. Eventually, my parents grew tired of it, calling it a phase. I forced myself to go back, to pretend everything was fine. But some nights, when everything was quiet and the house was dark, I swore I could still hear it. Not a whisper, not laughter, just the feeling of something there, waiting. And every now and then, I would wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, and glance toward my closet door, just to make sure it was still shut.